This is the story of how a Japanese engineer reading regulations in his second language spotted a loophole that native English speakers missed, and how it handed a bankrupt team both Formula One championships. In 2009, Brawn GP arrived at the season opener with a device so controversial that 3 teams filed protests within days. The twist? Ross Brawn had warned his rivals about the loophole months earlier, and they told him to get lost. So how did a simple reinterpretation of one rule turn into the most consequential exploit in modern F1 history? And why did the teams who could have built the same thing choose to ignore the warning instead? The answer involves a legal battle in Paris, a frantic development race worth millions, and a championship that slipped through the fingers of those who refused to listen. The double diffuser didn't originate with Brawn GP, it started with Super Aguri, the perennial backmarker that folded in May 2008. When their personnel scattered to other teams, they carried knowledge of a regulatory blind spot that would reshape the following season. A Japanese aerodynamicist named Masayuki Minagawa, nicknamed Mina, is credited with discovering the loophole. Working at Honda's facility in Tochigi, Minagawa was reading the 2009 technical regulations in English, his second language, and he interpreted Article 3.12.7 differently than native speakers did. The regulation stated that bodywork visible from beneath the car couldn't exceed 175 mm above the reference plane. But Minagawa realized something crucial. Bodywork that wasn't visible from directly below had no height restriction at all. The implementation was brilliant. Standard diffusers use a divergent channel under the rear of the car to accelerate airflow. This creates low pressure that generates downforce. The 2009 regulations intended to limit diffuser effectiveness by restricting that height to 175 mm. But by creating vertical slots that weren't visible from beneath, teams could feed air into a second diffuser deck above the regulated zone. This effectively doubled the diffuser volume and dramatically increased downforce. Here's where the story gets interesting. Ross Brawn didn't just build the device in secret, he obtained written approval from FIA technical delegate Charlie Whiting before the season, showing him simple sketches. Whiting reportedly said he didn't see any reason why it wouldn't be legal. Then Brawn did something remarkable. He tried to close the loophole. At a technical working group meeting, Brawn warned his rivals that aerodynamic performance of the cars would be a lot more than people thought. The other teams dismissed him. Several accused him of scaremongering. They said the rules were achieving their objectives. Brawn's reaction? He later admitted he thought, "Thank God for that." When the season started, the results spoke for themselves. Jenson Button won 6 of the first 7 races. Brawn GP achieved something no team had done since Mercedes in 1954, a 1-2 finish on their debut. The team's performance seemed impossible. They'd just emerged from a last-minute management buyout after Honda withdrew. They existed for barely 3 weeks before the season started, yet they were utterly dominant. But here's what most people get wrong about the double diffuser. It wasn't worth as much as everyone assumed. Brawn's principal aerodynamicist, John Owen, later revealed a startling fact. They put a conventional diffuser back on the car, re-optimized it, and only lost about 0.3 seconds in lap time. The direct advantage was relatively modest. So why were they so fast? The answer changes the entire story. The real advantage was aerodynamic stability. Under the new regulations, conventional diffusers stalled easily, making other developments ineffective. The double diffuser created such a robust rear aerodynamic platform that Brawn could properly develop complementary components. Owen explained that quite quickly, they were finding a second per lap in performance from the deflectors on the rear brake drums, and then the front wing offered another second. This is what rivals missed. They obsessed over copying the visible diffuser while ignoring Brawn's broader philosophy. Chief strategist James Vowles, who's now the Williams team principal, found it amusing. He said it just made them chuckle inside because it caused competitors to be distracted away from the primary goal of adding downforce to the car. Of course, not everyone accepted the situation quietly. Ferrari, Red Bull, and Renault filed formal protests on March 25, 2009, days before the Australian Grand Prix. The stewards rejected them the next day after 4 hours of deliberation. An immediate appeal followed. The FIA International Court of Appeal convened in Paris on April 14, 2009. Both sides brought their heaviest legal and technical firepower. Rory Byrne and Nicolas Tombazis represented Ferrari. Christian Horner and Rob Marshall appeared for Red Bull. Pat Simons argued for Renault. The appellants claimed the design violated the spirit of regulations meant to reduce downforce by 50%. They argued the slots were holes that violated requirements for solid, impervious surfaces. They invoked the overtaking working group's objectives. The verdict came on April 15th. Appeals denied. Diffusers legal. The court's reasoning was methodical. Article 3.12.5 applies to each surface individually, not collectively. Spaces between separate surfaces aren't prohibited holes. The 175mm height restriction applies only to bodywork visible from below. And, crucially, no party submitted conclusive evidence that double diffusers actually worsened following car aerodynamics. The ruling vindicated Brawn, Toyota, and Williams, but it forced 7 other teams into emergency development programs. McLaren and Renault had hedged their bets, developing double diffusers in tandem with their protest. Both debuted versions at the Chinese Grand Prix on April 19th, just 5 days after the ruling. Other teams faced harder challenges. Red Bull encountered the biggest obstacle. Their pull rod rear suspension connected right on the diffuser kickline, requiring complete gearbox redesign, new crash structure, and revised suspension mounting. Christian Horner called it almost a B-spec car, a massive commitment. They didn't debut their version until Monaco, the 6th race, on May 24th. Ferrari struggled with hydraulic system, gearbox, and suspension packaging that prevented ideal inlet positioning. Their version arrived at the Spanish Grand Prix, Race 5. BMW Sauber's Mario Thiessen called it a big handicap, noting they had to redesign the whole aero package without in-season testing. By the British Grand Prix, the 8th race, Brawn's advantage had evaporated. The numbers tell the story clearly. Brawn scored 96 points in the first 7 races, but only 76 points in the final 10. Red Bull, from Silverstone onward, scored 97 points versus Brawn's 76. But it was too late. Button clinched the championship with 95 points, 11 ahead of Sebastian Vettel. Brawn GP won the Constructors' title by 18.5 points over Red Bull. The controversy generated some of F1's most memorable quotes. Adrian Newey revealed in his book How to Build a Car that he had considered the double diffuser during design but rejected it, believing it would be declared illegal. He noted that Ross Brawn must have known about it for quite some time because he had been lobbying to further restrict the diffuser, knowing full well that with the double diffuser above it, it mattered. Much less how tall the diffuser underneath was. Christian Horner captured Red Bull's frustration perfectly. Trying to argue that a hole wasn't a hole, it was a slot, was frustrating. The damage was done in the first third. The double diffuser had a big impact on that. Jenson Button, meanwhile, bristled at the narrative that Brawn won purely through the diffuser. He pointed out there were 6 cars out of 22 on the grid with a double diffuser. 2 other teams had it, Toyota and Williams. Everyone seems to forget that. They just didn't perform as well. The reason was because the car was great. Not just the rear diffuser, but everything about the car. The technical working group met in late January 2010 and unanimously agreed to ban double diffusers. The ban took effect January 1st, 2011 through multiple regulation changes. The height limit dropped from 175 to 125 millimeters. New articles required 1 continuous line for any bodywork intersection with vertical planes in the central floor area. The loophole vanished overnight, but its legacy didn't. Martin Brundle offered perhaps the purest perspective on the whole affair. "You always read the rulebook twice," he said. "Once to see what it says, and the second time to see how to get around it. That's what they all do, and I love that about F1. The double diffuser changed how teams approach technical working group meetings. In 2022, AlphaTauri's Jody Egginton noted that now people are very careful in those meetings to follow the throwaway comment, a direct reference to how rivals dismissed Brawn's 2008 warning. Adrian Newey acknowledged that missing the double diffuser in 2009 fueled the foundations for pushing everything to the limit going forward. That mindset drove Red Bull's subsequent era of dominance. So what's the final verdict? Was it fair? Brawn actively warned rivals at the Technical Working Group. Charlie Whiting pre-approved the concept. 3 teams independently found the loophole. The regulations permitted it. Every team could have done the same homework. Ross Brawn did exactly what the sporting code encouraged, flagging a concern through proper channels. When dismissed, he exploited it to the fullest, winning championships with a team that existed for barely 3 weeks before the season started. That's not unsporting. That's Formula One at its most ruthlessly intelligent. And it remains the sport's most instructive case study in what happens when you ignore a warning from someone smarter than you.